Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Sarah, guys. Of course, today I am joined by my superstar co-host Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Jailer, a new hit film out of India from a creator and a star that are apparently incredibly famous, but we have never encountered before. That is, of course, director Nelson and star Rajinikanth. And today we're here to talk about Jailer and give you our thoughts on this movie. Oh, look, he's chomping his cigar. Tanner, take off your glasses because we're here to talk about Jailer. If you, of course, want to talk to us about Jailer or any of the other movies you've been watching or will be watching, ooh, that's pretty close. Those are pretty close glasses.
Yeah, pretty close.
You can join our Discord. That link is top of the description. And while you're down there looking for that link, you can also subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you know when you upload our videos. And leave a comment. Because if you are a Rajinikanth fan, we want to know what other Rajinikanth movies we should watch, because this is a guy that I want to see more of, Tanner. And how do you feel about Jailer and Rajinikanth in general?
Tucker, we've long said in the very limited number of Indian films that we've reviewed here on this channel and ones in the past, that we really appreciate how audacious Indian films are, especially when you compare them to the modern state of American action films.
Sure.
And Jailer is no exception to that. I still feel as though there's something a bit lacking in Jailer that I felt in other Indian films that I've experienced, namely story structure. I felt the story structure was a little bit all over the place, but it still has that sense of like pride in itself and in its own in its presentation, and just faith in the audience to like go along for the ride with all of these things. That it is fun regardless. It does have those moments, maybe a bit less than maybe some of the heights that we've seen in the past, particularly RRR, which you just rewatched actually.
I did.
Less than a week ago
with a crowd of screaming fans.
Exactly. Awesome. And this is obviously meant to be watched in a similar vein, but for me doesn't pack the same punch as like the best of the best.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like in an alternate world I would love Jailer. I think I would need to be in a theater with a bunch of people who are really familiar with this, that are really excited to see the new Rajinikanth movie. I was the only one in the theater.
Same here.
It was a small theater.
Same here.
I live in Texas. There's not a lot of screaming Indian cinema fans to gather up with, which is a little bit disappointing. So I'm obviously not reaching the pure potential of Jailer just from that starting level, but also because I'd never seen a film with Rajinikanth in it before, and he apparently, from the research that I've done, this is a film celebrating him, calling back to his earlier movies, his catchlines, his actions. These are things that, if you're a really big fan of him, are going to absolutely increase your enjoyment of this. So I understand why this movie is as popular as it is, getting the high reviews that it is, because it speaks to an audience. It is the 169th movie this guy has been in. It was teased as Rajinikanth 169. And it's just like, holy shit, his next movie, oh my god. But we didn't know about this guy. We weren't familiar with his tropes or the catchphrases and stuff that do make this feel very distinct. But it's something that we have to do research on. We have to have been different people watching different movies to really glom onto that. But that being said, I think I was still, especially by the end of the movie, able to appreciate what makes Rajinikanth distinct, the directorial style of Nelson, the flavor that Indian cinema is giving this movie, and I ended up enjoying it at the end. I think it was kind of hard for me to get into at first because I was like, oh, what the hell's going on here? But I think it has some really high highs, some great stylistic choices, some great performances, I would say, across the board, some fun, unique action stylings. But then there certainly are some elements of it, writing-wise and structure-wise, that I take pretty big issue with, that holds it back from being something that I really, really adore. But I also recognize that I'm not the right person to really appreciate Jailer, which is unfortunate, because I would love to.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In Tucker, you mentioned just the things of how we are outsiders, obviously coming into this, both from a national cinema standpoint, but also a familiarity with Rajinikanth. But even then, with the little bit of context that we had of this film, sort of celebrating him and his stardom, there are things that stick out to you and like you can intuit a little bit.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, definitely.
the glasses. The
Oh, the
glasses
glasses.
are
Oh my
treated
God, the
as
glasses.
his like superhero suit up moment.
Yeah.
Every time he puts them on, there's a lot of emphasis placed on them when they're sitting on a desk and he grabs them or what have you. Even the thing I did at the beginning with the cigar also kind of feels
Yeah.
like one of those moments. And honestly, if we can relate it back, this is like it's kind of like I don't know, like an Expendables movie to a certain extent, just celebrating the stardom of a action star, or I'm sure Rajinikanth has done things outside of that, but in an action format, celebrating this star, much like the Expendables series does, and will continue to do in Expendables.
Yeah, it's coming soon.
But anyway, I digress. Let's get to the meat on the bone here, Tucker.
Sure.
Where would you like to start with Jailer?
I think we have to start with Rajinikanth. I think that the elements that you were mentioning that give this film its distinct flavor are his charisma and his actions.
Yes.
That really are sold not only through his line delivery, but the filmmaking emphasis that is placed on this man. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it. The amount of slow-mo shots, the amount of slow zoom-ins, and the wind constantly flapping his hair just a tiny little bit. The movie is very focused cinematically within its shot composition and its lighting, everything, to focus in on this one guy. And when he's not on screen, you're like, uh-oh, when the hell is he going to pop out of the shadows?
Yeah.
When is he going to come around the corner, take off his glasses, say something cool, and then just blow everyone up or whatever? Because I think the thing that makes this film the most distinct and is both the element that I ended up appreciating most at the end, but also what made it kind of feel weird at the beginning, is that he doesn't do much physically.
I agree. I was going to mention
he is
this
a
as
very
well.
standing around kind of guy, doing some poses, looking cool, but he's also 72 years old.
I was just
so I
looking up
can
his age,
understand why he's not doing all sorts of crazy stunts and stuff. But so while I think that is was something weird for me to get used to at the beginning, by the end I'm like, I don't give a shit. He's cool. He's delivering lines, and in his facial acting and body acting that isn't the crazy stunts, he has this sense of presence that is kind of unmatched. Because he's not doing anything, he feels like he can just blink at someone and it'll fucking explode. Like, all the action scenes are like other people following his instructions, and so you get this sense that he is such a skilled and respected guy that an entire action sequence completely choreographed by him can happen while he's just standing there totally unscathed, and everything will go perfectly according to plan. And that is so distinct, and it focuses again right back on him. It's like he can go bing, 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 and then everything will go off, and be like, yeah, that's exactly what wanted to happen.
Oh yeah, and that's something that is in the script and his performance, I think.
Yeah.
And there's an element of that where I'm like, well, is that underwritten, or is it really just like a conscious sort of meta decision to cash in on the majority audience's idea, conceptualization, and background of Rajinikanth as a presence, as a charismatic presence, because he is very charismatic in this movie, Tucker. You're right. He is 72 years old, and he doesn't look it. He doesn't feel it either. No. He still feels very fresh, very charismatic, very intimidating. Even we get a little background for the character, for his character as the Tiger. The background for his jailer moniker as well. In a bit of a flashback sequence where he is kind of like this, like,
it's a great scene.
he's like this hard-nosed bastard psychopath, really, like running this prison and cutting people's ears off. And at that point, I have to say, we are meant to like him as a character, obviously, and he's doing this to, I'm sure, violent criminals or whatever. But even in that moment, I'm like, this guy's not like a good guy, and and that's something that like it is a common presence in a lot of action films. Is maybe our action hero isn't a wholeheartedly good guy, and that is
we agree with 100% on everything.
Exactly, who does the right thing all the time. They do make bad calls, and they are a grizzled psychopath at some points, and Mutta is very much one of those. Yeah.
Well, I think what makes his character so interesting is I think he was that, but by the time we see him in the current period in the movie, I feel like he has a much more balanced sense of right and wrong. We're not seeing him just go attack random people or like completely overstep his boundaries of like if they didn't do something wrong, he's gonna like really fuck them up. And his sense of right and wrong, I think, is tested quite a few times throughout the movie with a bunch of twists and people that he knows going against him and stuff. And I do think by the end of the movie, I'm like, okay, I see where this guy's motivations lie, where his moral sense of right and wrong comes from. But you're right, in that scene, which I still thought was an amazing scene. I thought his presence in it was fantastic, and some of the ideas of, I think that really tested the idea of he can kind of say and do whatever he wants, and no matter what, it's going to go his way. Because there's a guy in a prison, and he's like, you know what? I can defeat you. I'm going to call my guys, and they're going to come and beat you up. And he's like, okay, sure, call them. Yeah. See if you want to fucking try.
Yeah,
he's like, fuck around. He's literally the guy who's going to fuck around and find out.
That's a good point. He is.
and I think that really makes him distinct as an action character.
Yeah.
Is because he always is like 17 steps ahead of everyone else. And especially by the end of the movie, when the action scenes and the writing, I think, are working a little bit more in tandem, and he's choreographing things with a bunch of different guys and making these plans that last scenes and scenes and scenes, that is where I think his charisma and the combination of the action and the writing through his character come to their best fruition. Which is why I think the movie's maybe a little bit unbalanced. I found that first half to be a lot more confusing and a lot less going on that really, like, I don't know, grabbed me in a certain way. But then the second half is just kind of a crazy action movie, like a heist movie and stuff.
You hit the intermission, and then afterwards we take like a kind of a big diversion to go to this like I know that I'm going to say Bollywood, knowing that it might not be like a Bollywood set. I'm just going to use that as a moniker. Overall, a film set essentially with a big like action comedy
with Blast Mohan,
a big action comedy star at the sort of pinnacle, who is embroiled in the criminal underground as well, and is also embroiled in a love triangle that becomes a large focus of this. I felt it was a little bit of a departure story-wise.
Yes. No, definitely is.
We spend a lot of time there, and then because I kept checking my watch, I was like, we gotta wrap the main chunk of the story up, and we're spending a lot of time here. Regardless, it's fun. There are fun presences to be found here.
Oh, definitely.
We also get,
I think some of the most fun is in that section.
We also get a little dance sequence there as well, which is sort of a staple as we've come to understand it in Indian cinema. So we get that there, and I always love those because I'm a big song and dance guy. And then ultimately, we do wrap it back around with this idea of like stealing the crown for the villain whose name is Varman, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
And there's the classic switcheroo that is in these heist action movies where there's a fake and they have to replace it. And then we're back into the main conclusion of the action story with only 20-30 minutes left of the film to wrap all of those things up. So. That's another thing where it's like there's pros and cons to that as well. We get a fun sequence, but I think it is at the sort of detriment of staying focused on the main story.
Yeah, I think that actually the whole Blast Mohan section, everything involving the film set, is probably my favorite section of the film because I think it gains the film's strongest identity. Because one element of this film we have yet to draw in on is the comedy.
Oh, sure,
This is the funniest Indian movie I've seen. Again, limited knowledge there, but the amount of times that Rajinikanth's presence is like intimidating other people and they're like basically pissing their pants and like chopping their fingernails to a comedic moment is so good. I think specifically to the moment where he's got this like button under the table wherever he like wants to be intimidating, he presses it and the lights turn red and this guy's like, oh god, what the hell's going on? Or there's just a lot of like joke moments, and there's a few characters that are intended as like comedic relief, and I thought they were so much fun. Or even the moment where they were on that film set and he's one of the extras, and then Blast Mohan's like, no, he's taking too much attention away, send that guy to the back, and he's like on a cliff in the background dancing. It's like there's so much comedy in this movie to a surprising degree, and I think the comedy with Rajinikanth like standing there and like glowering and wearing his glasses, but comedy happening around him, is where I thought this movie was at its most distinct. It was simple action moments, simple amounts of violence mixed with comedy that were really, really fun, and I think the movie strays away from that a little too often, where it takes itself really seriously. And I'm going to draw in on my biggest criticism with this film, is I think that the screenplay, with the amount of people and friends that he knows
Yes.
and guys that this guy sent there, and who does this guy control, and then people just show up and go away and they help him or they're against him, and I could never really keep it straight. And I think that's because the screenplay is just way too complex. I mean, can you imagine if we pared it down and didn't have as many random people entering and leaving the script that are probably very big action stars that we would be excited to see and would make a little more sense contextually if we're more familiar with the industry, but on a script level, focusing in on his vengeance to find his son, and Varman, who is, I think, a phenomenal bad guy with an amazing performance, focusing on those and then maybe giving more emphasis to that whole Blast Mohan stealing the crown love triangle element, which I did enjoy so much, I think the movie would have felt a lot more focused. But as it stands, there's a lot of bad guy fodder and B-tier villains and B-tier heroes that I didn't even realize were good guys or bad guys, or I'm like, had we seen them before? How am I supposed to know?
He has his like pals who are former criminals that were reformed by him in prison, I guess, who come around at the end to help him out. But they do pop up just sort of randomly, as in like, well, we need to go see this guy. Why? Because we need to go see him and set him up so he comes around at the end of the movie. And not a whole lot of legwork is done there in terms of making that feel earned or making that feel worthwhile in the moment. What else? I also want to double back and say yes, Varman is a fantastic villain, as portrayed by Vinayakan. He has this maniacal sort of aura about him that sort of is like the perfect opposite end of the coin of like Mutha's very like calm, collected, very confident sort of demeanor. He's like it's his Joker essentially is what
absolutely.
I think is exactly what he's going for. He does feel intimidating, and we have these moments directorially where we push in right on his face, and his facial acting is really great as well, where he has this big smile on his face. He also has these very distinct, like sharply colored eyes that we focus.
They're
in
contacts,
on.
which is a very interesting choice to like make him seem a little bit more deranged. He's like he's got
like
this crazy
demonic
look in his eyes. But it's because they gave him like lighter colored contacts. Like this guy has like normal dark colored eyes that would fit his face more, but then you see him with like light brown eyes and you're like, that's not human, like that's not how genetics work, like how the hell did that happen? And it gives him like this edge, and then you're like, this guy could snap and do some weird shit at any point.
It makes him feel more deranged, certainly, and obviously we are that's like the first scene of the movie is him like dunking dudes into vats of sulfuric acid.
He likes to do that.
He loves doing that. We also love executing people in groups of 3 in this movie. I noticed as well.
Yeah, sure.
That happens 3 or 4 times. And to that point, I mentioned sort of the directorial choice there. I do want to sort of applaud Nelson as a director here.
Yeah.
Script issues aside, this film, as you were mentioning earlier, has a very distinct sense of style, has a very distinct sense of action and what we're doing with our main star. And even moments shocked me with how good the cinematography is as well.
Absolutely,
One of my favorite recurring shots is actually the poster that I've chosen on Letterboxd. I'm a Letterboxd patron, not to brag. But it's the
Mr. Moneybags over here, goddamn.
But it's the recurring shot of him like lacing up his shoes, sort of blocked off by a wall. We only see his legs. That's a recurring shot, and then there's just good like I love a good backlit landscape shot. We get a couple of those out in the wilderness when we're like taking out a convoy or whatever. There is just a lot to like here from a directorial standpoint.
Yeah, I think that the movie succeeds at its best for me in moments, regardless of if the context of the scene is understandable to me. I might not know why we're here or who these people are, but this movie succeeds on consistently providing really interesting moments, both cinematically and action-wise, that I thought were really clever and very interesting. And I want to draw in on a few primarily, and I think this might be my favorite scene in the movie, the scene where he reveals to his wife and his daughter-in-law that he is actually an action guy and he's violent and he wants to kill people. And he's hired 4 snipers to guard his house.
The 4 big guys. I love these big guys with their big mustaches and sometimes the wigs that they wear.
And a bunch of bad guys are coming to kill him, and he's sitting at a table, and he tells his wife and daughter-in-law, sit down, don't get up from the chair no matter what happens. And he doesn't even flinch.
No.
The entire time as, like, 30 guys are entering his house and getting blasted from every which way, and bad guys are landing on the table and then on the lap of his wife and his daughter-in-law, and he's just like...
Yeah, push him off.
He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And I think that is the perfect example of how he is not doing a lot physically in the scene, but acting-wise and writing-wise, there's so much in the character in that moment. He's so ridiculously overconfident in his ability and the fact that he knows what's going to happen in every scenario, that he can literally sit on his ass and just smile.
Yeah.
While... like dozens of guys are getting killed in brutal ways around him and right in front of him. I loved that scene.
Well, yeah, and it's just a very different flavor of action than what we've experienced with our three Indian cinema theatrical experiences, those being RRR, Brahmastra Part 1, and Pathan, where all of our heroes there are either doing like sweet actual hand-to-hand combat and leaping around, or doing even like superhero beam laser powers or whatever. He is very just like he's very just like singular in his presence and very restricted in his presence. And I think that also makes hit the limited action moments that he does get feel a bit more powerful and a bit more sleek, and like, oh, he's actually busting it out here.
Yeah.
Particularly when he's
taking the chains off.
Exactly. Particularly in the moment where he beheads that one guy, just like when the taxi pulls up. That's like the first moment of action that you get from him, and it is done in this sort of like just quick, smooth motion where you're like, it brings across that idea of he is a professional. He is like the best guy in the world.
And he can when he's pushed to.
Exactly. He can and he will, and you don't want him to.
I also love this moment where he's about to get like shot in the head by like 4 different guys, and he has his pistol, and then a knife comes out of the bottom of his pistol, and he goes swing, and he like cuts all their throats.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell was that? I don't even know what just happened.
Yeah. A lot of fun. We didn't talk about a lot about the supporting cast in a positive sense. We talked about how there are sort of ancillary characters that are introduced and dropped at kind of at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
But we do have some common presences throughout this, namely his like taxi driver sidekick, Vimal.
Yogi Babu playing Vimal here. He's really funny.
He is very funny as this like sort of guy who is introduced as maybe like a bully, and then he gets absolutely fish out of water dropped into the ocean of this vast criminal underworld, and he is totally flipped. He's very nervous about the whole deal, but he goes along with it regardless because he's either scared or in awe or both of Mutha. So he's a fun presence here as well.
Yeah. I don't actually remember the character's name, but the guy who's the assistant to the director is so fucking funny.
Oh yeah, he's always doing like
he's so funny.
He's always doing like that kind of noise.
I know what's going on. And he's making funny noises, and he's always got a weird smile on his face. And I really appreciated, as I said earlier, the supporting characters that are our comedic relief, because again, I think they draw into specific the comedic tone that this movie I think succeeds its best at. When it's just a dramatic criminal scene between 2 guys that have some beef and want money or whatever, I'm like,
I want a little bit more.
Add a joke here.
Yeah.
I like bring a little personality to this. But again, I really do think this movie ended up convincing me of why this style of action filmmaking, this style of action star that we don't get at all anymore. I mean, you could even call this back to Stallone and Schwarzenegger from back in the 80s of just spouting one-liners and having shots that are entirely composed to have them look cool and to be in their cool suits or whatever. That's what Rajinikanth does here, and it feels almost out of an era for us as American film goers, but it recaptures a very distinct spark, and it makes me want to learn more about Rajinikanth, watch more of his movies, more of this kind of side of Indian action that isn't what RRR and Pathan did, which was holy shit, crazy CGI nonsense. This is much more grounded, and I initially didn't like it because I'm like, oh, I wish this was a little more showing action, having more stunt choreography. But as it went, I'm like, this has its own flavor, and it's delivering on that style in very specific ways. And my appreciation of this movie, I think, can only increase as I learn more about Rajinikanth and maybe go back and watch some of his movies and realize, oh, that's what that line was referencing. Oh, the thing with the cigar, the thing with the glasses. Oh, these are things that that he'd been doing for 40 fucking years or whatever. Especially one of my favorite, like, single weird jokes in the movie is when he's, like, commanding a couple guys to be executed in the sulfuric acid, and he, like, chomps on a cigar and then chops it up and chops it down to direct the guys to go in.
I was attempting to do that at the beginning of the review here, and I couldn't quite get it down, obviously. I don't have the decades of experience that he obviously had, but...
Of cigar chomp. Decades of cigar chomping, not quite yet.
I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a 7 out of 10.
Okay, great, yeah. That's certainly higher than I thought you would go, but you know what? I also really, really like this movie. I'm going to go quite a bit higher at a 7.7 out of 10. I think this was a quite fantastic movie, and again, I can only like this movie more as time goes on. I think I'll only continue to appreciate it more, so I really do recommend going to see Jailer if you have a chance, and again, if you are more experienced with Rajinikanth films, as many, many people are, give us recommendations. What are your favorites? What are the ones that made him famous? What are the ones some of these bits come from? And we will hopefully get around to watching those and being able to appreciate this and Rajinikanth a little bit better in the future. But thank you very much, everyone, for watching. We will be back for other movies. Who the hell knows? We didn't even know this movie existed until like 4 days ago. So Here we are, reviewing it.